here in Washington, D.C., about 3 blocks from where I'm sitting. Tomorrow, the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments in the gay marriage case. And what's interesting about this is the whole history behind not just the gay marriage case, but these quote religious freedom bills. I would call them right to discriminate bills, right for businesses to discriminate based on presumably the religion of some of their stockholders or shareholders or management or whatever. And these the origin of this whole thing, where it all started, is really fascinating stuff. I mean, it's like, it began. Well, in fact, we're going to get Kevin Cruz on the show. He wrote a book called One Nation Under God. And just some little pieces of this. Back in 1940, we were coming out of the Great Depression, and 5,000 industrialists were gathered together in New York City at the Waldorf Astoria, which is still a nice hotel, but at that time it was the nice hotel in New York City. And they had, the CEOs speaking from General Motors, General Electric, Standard Oil, Mutual Life, Sears Roebuck, even J. Edgar Hoover spoke, the FBI director. And it ended, pretty much, this meeting, with a speech by a fellow that nobody had heard of then, and probably most people haven't heard of now. His name was James W. Fifield Jr. And it's and I just put 2 and 2 together because I saw a friend of mine over the weekend who said, do you know about James Fifield? And I'm like, no, but I had read the name before, but I didn't recognize it. He got up and he gave a speech, and he said, as a minister, as a Christian minister, 1940, he said that the New Deal was an encroachment. This is FDR's New Deal, right? Got us out of the Great Depression, brought us Social Security and unions and all that kind of stuff. He said it was an encroachment on our American freedoms. He said there's a multitude of federal agencies attached to the executive branch that represent the menace of autocracy approaching through bureaucracy. In other words, our government was going to, because of our regulatory agencies, and this was even before the EPA and half the regulatory agencies we have now, through our regulatory agencies, our government was becoming oppressive. Well, to whom? To business. It's not oppressive to you or me, but, I don't have to fill out forms with the EPA. But if I was refining oil, or burning oil for that matter, I might have to. And as Cruz writes, Kevin Cruz writes in his book, he says, Fifield's audience of executives is stunned. He said these titans of industry had been basically taking on the story since 1928. Keep in mind, this was, these people, most of these people saw the Great Crash, lived through the Great Depression. This is now just a decade later. And they had been taking the blame for it, right? I mean, America was blaming the big businesses and the Republicans for the Great Depression. And rightfully so, by the way, because they caused the Great Depression, just like they caused the crash in 2008, just like they're going to cause the next crash, what I call the crash of 2016. So what did Fifield said? He said, you got to get religion. Start using religion to essentially manipulate the masses. It's almost like he read Das Kapital. Karl Marx says religion is the opiate of the masses. And he was like, yeah, let's start throwing some opium at these people. To quote Cruz's book, he said, Fifield told the industrialists that clergymen would be crucial in regaining the upper hand in their war with Roosevelt. Now, this is mind-boggling to me because, Christianity is so explicit that to be a Christian, and of course it's not unique to Christianity. It's these same sentiments are found in Islam and Judaism and in the non-monotheistic religions in Buddhism and Hinduism and all of these are just core human principles that humility and the people who seek riches are getting stuck and blah, 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 blah. Anyhow, he says, so Fifield told the industrialists that clergymen would be crucial in regaining the upper hand in their war with Roosevelt. As men of God, ministers could voice the same conservative complaints as business leaders, but without the suspicion that they were motivated by self-interest. They could push back against claims made by Roosevelt that business had somehow sinned and the welfare state was doing God's work. And Cruz writes, this was a watershed moment. This was a new blend of conservative religion, conservative economics, conservative politics. One observer aptly anointed it Christian libertarianism. And this led to the rise of Billy Graham and all these things. The head of the Federal Council of Churches had said of the New Deal that it embodied Christian principles, right? Originally, the churches in America were all gung-ho, or most of the churches in America were all gung-ho in favor of Franklin Roosevelt. The president of the Federal Council of Churches said that the New Deal embodies Christian principles such as, quote, the significance of daily bread, shelter, and security. So here you've got, religious leaders in the United States supporting the New Deal. And so business leaders said, it can't be us against the churches. So we've got to invent our own churches, basically. A neo-Calvinism, a new religious doctrine. And so Reverend Fifield took over the First Congregational Church in Los Angeles in 1935. He was nicknamed the Apostle to Millionaires. This was a church that, many of the very wealthy people in Hollywood went to. And notably, Cruz writes in his book, Fifield dismissed the many passages in the New Testament about wealth and poverty and instead assured the elite that their worldly success was a sign of God's blessings. Right? Where have we heard this before? And he founded a group called Spiritual Mobilization, whose mission was, quote, to arouse the ministers of all denominations in America to check the trend toward pagan statism, which would destroy our basic freedom and spiritual ideals. He said, God imbued us with inalienable rights, which included enterprise and property. God wants you to be rich. God wants you to be a business person. And churches, he said, have the solemn duty to defend those rights against the encroachments of the state. So now we've got a fundamentalist Christian effort by business to take over to take over religion in America and influence the American people. I keep telling you that the Republican Party, and this was business leaders, these were Republicans by and large, although back then there were probably more pro-corporate Democrats, or a few anyway. Actually, in the 1940s, most all Democrats were just gung-ho for FDR. But I've said so often that there, in the Republican Party, there are the billionaires, there are the paid shills for the billionaires, and there are the suckers. And so this brilliant strategy by the National Association of Manufacturers to turn Christian ministers into paid shills for the billionaires to bring in more suckers. So people think that if they're voting Republican, they're doing it because that's what Christ would want them to do. I would argue not so much. I definitely don't think that's what Christ wants.